Not every price shock begins with an empty shelf. Sometimes it begins the moment you pick up a familiar item, stare at the price tag a few seconds longer, and ask yourself, when did it get this expensive? In today's video, we are going to look at 12 foods facing the most pressure, with some now far above their lowest prices from the past 3 years. The worrying part is that these are not unfamiliar items. They are morning coffee, eggs in the refrigerator, ground beef for dinner, bread on the table, and the packaged foods many families still buy every week. The real shock is not just that prices are rising. The shock is when you realize you have changed the way you shop. Some items on this list are not only more expensive, they are changing the way Americans eat every week. And the number one item may be sitting in your kitchen right now. 12. Retail coffee prices in the US have increased by more than 100% compared with early 2020 across many brands and regions. That number may sound distant until you stand in front of the shelf and pick up the exact coffee you have bought for years. Not a premium brand, not a specialty product, just the familiar bag of coffee in your kitchen every morning. Then you look at the price tag and ask yourself, when did something meant only to start the day become this expensive? Coffee does not fill you up like rice, and it does not provide protein like meat. But for millions of people, it is the first ritual of the morning. And that is exactly why its price is dangerous. It hits a habit, not just a wallet. Many people think coffee prices are rising simply because companies want to make more profit. But the story goes much deeper than that. Brazil, the world's largest coffee producer, has repeatedly faced drought, frost, and extreme weather. Vietnam, another major supplier, has also been affected by unstable climate conditions. When two major production centers are under pressure at the same time, the market begins to react. Then come fuel, shipping, labor, roasting, packaging, and distribution. Each link rises a little, and in the end, the shopper is the one who pays the bill. What many people do not realize is that coffee prices often rise very quietly. First, there are fewer sales. Then the bags get smaller. Then even the store brand is no longer as cheap as before. Prices do not always rise with a loud noise. Sometimes they rise through a disappearing promotion and a package that is a few ounces lighter. Not every brand triples in price, but if you look back at the lowest prices from a few years ago, many people feel that shock getting very close. The practical tip is not to wait until the last container runs completely empty before buying more. Watch for real sales, buy just enough to rotate, keep it airtight, and avoid heat. Because sometimes today's sale price can become next year's regular price. Do you remember the last time you bought coffee without even needing to look at the price? 11. Ground beef. In April 2026, the average price of ground beef in the US reached nearly $6.90 per pound, the highest level ever recorded. But that number only truly hurts when it enters the kitchen. A pot of chili on a cold night, a plate of spaghetti for the family, a few weekend hamburgers. For years, ground beef was something people bought almost out of habit. But now, many people stand in front of the meat case longer, looking at the tray of meat and then the price tag, calculating whether that 1 pound is still enough for the whole family. When an ordinary meal starts requiring you to count every ounce, the family budget has truly changed. The beef crisis did not begin in the supermarket. It began on dry pastures years ago. When drought lasts, grass becomes scarce. When grass becomes scarce, feed costs rise. When costs become too high, many ranchers have to reduce their herds just to survive. And this is the part shoppers rarely see. When breeding cows are sold off, the future calves disappear with them. Fewer calves today means less beef in the next few years. You can plant more wheat in one season, but you cannot rebuild a cattle herd in just a few months. Ground beef still has clear nutritional value: complete protein, iron, zinc, and vitamin B12. For many older adults, it is a familiar source of protein, easy to cook and easy to combine with many dishes. But the way people use it is changing. 1 pound of meat that once covered a dinner is now being stretched with beans, potatoes, pasta, or vegetables. Not because beef has lost its value. On the contrary, because it is so valuable, people are trying to make every pound go farther. Not every store has the same price, and not every place is rising the same way. But compared with the period when many families could still buy beef around under $5 per pound, today's nearly $7 level is a very big jump. Food does not always disappear from the shelf. Sometimes it disappears from the budget first. What about your household? Do you still buy ground beef the way you used to? Or have you started mixing in beans, pasta, or potatoes to stretch the meal? 10 eggs. More than $8 for a dozen eggs. Just a few years ago, many people would have thought that was impossible. But in 2025, that price appeared in many areas across the United States. And that is exactly what makes eggs one of the most notable stories in the entire supermarket. Because when steak prices rise, people may complain. When lobster prices rise, people may skip it. But when egg prices surge, almost every family feels it. Eggs are not a luxury food. They are breakfast, they are a birthday cake, they are a weekend batch of cookies. They are a food many people grew up with from childhood. The interesting thing is that many people now say, egg prices have come back down. That is true. But that is not the most important question. The more important question is, come down to what level? This is one of the most expensive lessons of inflation. When an item stays too expensive for too long, the brain begins to accept a new price as normal. A dozen eggs used to be something people put in the cart without thinking. Today, many people still look at the price board before deciding how many to buy. The cause behind it is not a supermarket decision. It began with avian flu. Millions of egg-laying hens were culled to prevent the disease from spreading. Supply dropped sharply while demand remained almost unchanged. And here is what many people miss. You cannot rebuild an industrial-scale egg-laying flock in just a few weeks. Everything takes time. Meanwhile, the market responds with the thing consumers hate most: higher prices. What makes eggs special is that their value is still very hard to replace. One egg provides complete protein, vitamin B12, vitamin D, and choline at a cost that is still much lower than many other protein sources. That is why even when prices rise, shoppers keep coming back to the egg case. In reality, many families have not stopped buying eggs. They have only changed when they buy them. They take advantage when prices cool down. They pay more attention to sales. They begin watching the market for a food that no one used to think they had to track. What is the highest egg price you have ever seen where you live? And now, have you gone back to buying them like before? Or do you still hesitate every time you walk up to the egg section? 9. Wheat, bread, and wheat-based products. If I took one loaf of bread out of your cart, you might still finish your shopping trip. But if I took everything made from wheat out of your cart, there is a good chance half of your meals for the week would disappear. That is why wheat is one of the most dangerous items on this list. Not because it has risen the most, but because it appears everywhere. Bread, cereal, crackers, pasta, cookies, pizza, pancake mix. Hundreds of different products all begin with the same basic ingredient. What makes this story worth noticing is that most shoppers do not see that connection. When bread prices rise, they think it is a bread issue. When a box of cereal goes up, they think it is a cereal issue. When pasta becomes more expensive, they think it is a separate problem. But in reality, many products are being affected by the same source. That is why wheat is like an underground current beneath the entire food system. You do not always see it, but you feel its impact everywhere. In recent years, the global wheat industry has faced constant pressure from extreme weather, drought, fertilizer costs, and fuel costs. But the important part is that the wheat grain is only the first step. After that come flour mills, production lines, packaging, transportation, and retail. Every link adds more cost to the final product. That is why sometimes the price of a loaf of bread does not reflect only a wheat field, but the entire system standing behind it. Nutritionally, wheat-based products are still an important source of energy for millions of families. They are easy to store, easy to prepare, and often form the foundation of reasonably priced meals. That is also why any fluctuation in wheat has a very wide ripple effect. Some people can cut back on coffee, some people can eat less beef, but it is very hard to completely avoid wheat-based products. So tell me, over the past year, what surprised you the most? The price of bread, cereal, pasta, or cookies? 8. Olive oil. Some bottles of olive oil used to sit in the shopping cart like a side item. Today, in many stores, it is priced like a decision. In just a few years, olive oil prices in many areas have risen so sharply that many people have started looking at the price tag for the first time before putting the bottle in their cart. And the important thing is that this is not a temporary shock. It is the result of years of built-up pressure that most consumers have never seen. If you ask an ordinary person why olive oil prices are rising, they may give a very simple answer: drought. But the real story is much bigger than that. An olive tree is not like a cornfield. It cannot be replanted and harvested after just one season. When extreme heat, prolonged drought, or falling yields hit, the damage can last for years. That is why what happens in Spain, Italy, or Greece today can still affect your grocery bill years later. The difficult part of the olive oil market is not the crop failure itself. The difficult part is that recovery time is always slower than the speed of price increases. What makes olive oil special is that shoppers do not see it as a luxury item. It is something drizzled over salad. It is in the pan with salmon. It appears in roasted vegetables. It is part of a lifestyle that millions of people have followed for years. And that is why, even when prices rise, demand does not disappear. People may buy less. They may switch to a smaller bottle. But many families still want to have at least one bottle in the kitchen. There is a memorable line like this: olive oil prices are not rising because everyone is using more of it. They are rising because nature does not work on the market's schedule. When trees need years to recover, consumers have to learn to live with new prices longer than they expected. One simple solution is to buy dark bottles, store them away from heat, and take advantage of real sales instead of buying in a rush when the last bottle is already empty. Because in this period, saving money is not about buying more. Saving money is about buying at the right time. Are olive oil prices today making you change your favorite brand or change the way your household uses it? 7. Orange juice. A generation of Americans grew up believing that orange juice would always be there. A glass of orange juice on the breakfast table was once so familiar that few people ever thought about where it came from. But today, the story behind that glass of orange juice is changing much faster than many people realize. Over the past few years, orange juice prices have risen sharply, and for some products, the gap between their lowest price and their current price is large enough to make shoppers pause for a few seconds in front of the shelf. What makes this story unique is that it does not begin in the supermarket. It begins in the orange groves. Florida was once the symbol of the American citrus industry. But hurricanes, citrus greening disease, extreme weather, and declining production have put constant pressure on the industry for years. The result is that the United States is becoming increasingly dependent on outside supply to fill the gap. And when that happens, any disruption in the global market can quickly show up on the price tag at a local supermarket. What makes orange juice different from many other beverages is the emotional factor. People do not buy orange juice only for vitamin C. They buy it for habit, for memories, for the familiar feeling of a weekend morning. That is why many people do not realize prices have changed until they notice a smaller bottle or a higher grocery bill. Orange juice is not disappearing from America overnight. It is leaving the breakfast table 1 ounce at a time. Some families are returning to frozen orange juice concentrate, a product that was once extremely popular but gradually faded from view. It often stores longer and, in some cases, offers better value than ready-to-drink products. But the larger lesson lies elsewhere. When an industry once considered untouchable begins to struggle, consumers are usually the first to feel it. So let's be honest. When was the last time you bought orange juice without even looking at the price? 6. Frozen seafood. The fish in the freezer is not cold because it is simple. It is cold because an entire system has to keep running to keep it alive. A bag of shrimp, tilapia, fish fillets, or fish sticks may look very ordinary, but behind it are fishing boats, processing plants, refrigerated containers, cold storage, refrigerated trucks, electricity, fuel, and thousands of miles of transportation. All it takes is one link in that chain becoming more expensive, and the seemingly affordable meal in the freezer starts changing price. And that is why many families are realizing frozen seafood is no longer as easy on the wallet as it was a few years ago. What can be misleading is that America has a very long coastline. So many people assume seafood must be abundant. But supermarkets do not just need fish. They need the right kind of fish that shoppers are used to eating, the right size for packaging, the right price to compete, and the right delivery schedule to cover thousands of stores. A piece of fish may travel farther than your entire vacation before it ends up in the freezer. And every mile of that journey has a cost. Frozen seafood still has a reason to stay in the kitchen. It is often easy to cook, lighter than many kinds of red meat, rich in protein, and with some types of fish. It also provides omega-3s that are good for the heart and brain. But in a period of price volatility, buying smart matters more than buying more. Look at the price per pound, not just the price on the bag. Prioritize the kind your family will actually eat, because a freezer full of food no one wants to touch is literally money frozen in place. The ocean does not increase production just because supermarkets need lower prices. Fish do not reproduce faster because consumers are frustrated with their grocery bills. So if cold storage, fuel, and import costs remain high, price pressure could last. In your freezer, which seafood item has gone from convenient extra purchase to something you have to think twice about before grabbing? 5. Canned fish. Some cans of fish are so small that people walk past without looking. But in a truly smart pantry, size does not measure strength. A can of tuna, sardines, salmon, or mackerel does not need refrigeration, does not need long cooking, does not fear a few hours of power outage, and can sit quietly on the shelf for a very long time. It is the kind of food that feels ordinary on a stable day, but becomes extremely valuable when fresh meat, electricity, gas, and convenience foods all rise in price. Canned fish prices are not rising for one single reason. They are being pulled by many strings at once. Fishing boat fuel is higher, transportation costs are higher, Metal cans are more expensive, and labor and packaging are not as cheap as before. Even when the fish inside has not changed much, the can that holds it, the ship that moves it, and the journey that brings it to the shelf can all push the final price higher. That is the quiet kind of inflation. Just a little each time. But after a few years, shoppers look back and realize the familiar can of fish is no longer as cheap as they remember. The value of canned fish lies in its flexibility. One can become a sandwich, be mixed with rice, eaten with crackers, added to salad, stirred into pasta, or become a quick lunch when you do not want to cook. Many types also contain protein, omega-3s, and vitamin D. Sardines with soft bones also provide extra calcium. For older adults, this is very practical. Little preparation, easy portioning, and no need to stand at the stove for long. But buying canned fish also requires clear thinking. Do not fill the pantry with types your family will not eat just because you heard they are worth stockpiling. A good pantry is not the one with the most cans. A good pantry is the one where every can has a chance to be used before it is forgotten. If canned fish is getting more expensive in your home, which type do you usually choose to keep? Familiar tuna, more expensive salmon, nutrient-rich sardines, or mackerel that is both affordable and filling? 4. Butter. There is a very strange sign of food inflation. It is not when people stop buying an item, it is when they keep buying it even though they know the price has risen a lot. Butter is one of those products. In many families, butter is not the main dish. It is just a thin layer on morning toast, a small piece on mashed potatoes, an ingredient in cookies, cakes, or weekend dinners. But it is exactly these small things that quietly remind us that everything has changed. If you look back a few years, some people could put several boxes of butter into the cart without thinking much. Today, more and more people look at the price tag first, not because they want to give up butter, but because they are surprised to see a familiar item climb to a price level they used to see only in more premium products. And here is the part worth noticing. Butter is not rising in price only because of milk. Behind it are feed costs, fuel, electricity for the cold chain, labor, transportation, and especially butterfat, the core ingredient used to make butter. What makes butter different from many other foods is the emotional factor. A meal can still exist without butter, but for many people, it no longer feels the same. A slice of hot toast with a layer of melted butter, a fresh batch of cookies from the oven, a bowl of smooth mashed potatoes. This is not just food. This is the feeling of comfort in the kitchen. And the foods tied to memory are often the last ones consumers want to give up. Nutritionally, butter provides fat and dense energy. It is not a perfect food for every diet, but it still holds its own place in millions of kitchens. One practical tip many families use is to buy it during big sales and freeze it properly. Butter freezes fairly well if it is wrapped tightly and clearly dated. That helps reduce pressure when prices rise unexpectedly in the future. When budgets tighten, people often hold on to the things that keep the kitchen feeling like home. For many families, butter is on that list. So let's be honest. What food in your home would no longer feel the same without a little butter? 3. Cheese. There is a type of price increase that is more dangerous than a sudden jump on the price tag. It is when consumers keep buying a product as usual, but receive less value without realizing it. And cheese is one of the clearest examples. Not because it is disappearing from store shelves, not because people have stopped eating it. Quite the opposite. It is everywhere. In sandwiches, in burgers, in scrambled eggs, on pizza, in casseroles, in some of the quickest and most familiar meals in America. What is interesting is that many people do not realize they are paying extra for convenience. A block of cheddar cheese and a bag of shredded cheese may start from the same ingredient, but the shredded version usually carries higher processing, packaging, and storage costs. When milk, energy, and transportation costs all rise, those small differences begin to add up. That is why many families look at their grocery bill and feel that something is off, even though they cannot point to one specific product. What makes cheese special is that it rarely stands on its own. It is usually the thing that makes a meal more appealing. A burger without cheese is still a burger. But for many people, it is no longer the burger they want. A plate of pasta is still edible. But a small layer of cheese can completely change the experience. That is why demand for cheese is often more resilient than many people expect. From a nutritional standpoint, cheese provides protein, calcium, and energy. For many older adults, it remains a convenient and easy-to-use source of nutrition. But there is a very quiet trend taking place. Many families are not giving up cheese. They are simply using less of it. The slice of cheese on a sandwich becomes thinner. The layer of cheese on a meal becomes lighter. The bag of shredded cheese is stretched across a few more dinners. This is exactly the kind of change inflation likes most. It happens so slowly that people barely notice. Sometimes inflation does not take away the product. It takes away the generosity in the way we use that product. And cheese is a perfect example. Think back for a moment. Over the past year, have you found yourself becoming more careful with cheese without ever planning to? 2. Chocolate. Some foods feed the body, and some foods feed the spirit. Chocolate belongs to the second group. That is why its story is more worth noticing than many people think. Over the past few years, global cocoa prices have gone through one of the most volatile periods in history. At one point, cocoa prices on the world market rose to levels many experts never thought they would see in their careers. That may sound distant, until you hold a familiar chocolate bar in your hand and feel that it is lighter than before, smaller than before, but more expensive. What makes this story different from beef, eggs, or bread is that chocolate is not a survival need. No one needs chocolate to live. But millions of people still buy it. A small bar after dinner, a box of candy for the grandkids, a small gift on the weekend. That is why chocolate is like an emotional thermometer for the economy. When everything becomes expensive, people may cut back on big expenses, but they still try to keep the small pleasures that make life feel less stressful. Behind the price crisis is the story of cocoa. Most of the world's supply comes from Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire. When extreme weather, crop disease, and production pressure appear at the same time, output begins to decline. That pushes raw material prices higher. Then come sugar, milk, packaging, and transportation. The result is a familiar phenomenon consumers can see. The chocolate bar gets smaller before they realize the real price has gone up. That is exactly what makes chocolate dangerous. It usually does not rise in price with a loud noise. It rises by taking away a few ounces, a few pieces of candy, or part of the size that shoppers do not notice. That is why so many people feel their grocery bill rising without knowing exactly what is happening. Tell me, what snack did you used to buy comfortably a few years ago, but now always check the price before deciding? 1. Packaged foods. There is a very uncomfortable feeling many people only realize after they get home. You just spent $150 at the supermarket. The receipt is not small, but when you look at the cart, it does not look like a $150 cart. It looks like a $100 cart from a few years ago. Not because you bought less, not because you forgot to grab something, but because so many familiar products have changed in the quietest way possible. That is why packaged foods are ranked number 1 on this list. Not because they are rising the fastest, not because they are the rarest, but because they appear everywhere. Cereal on the breakfast table, soup in the pantry, pasta sauce for dinner, crackers in the drawer, mac and cheese, cookies, snacks. Items so familiar that many people no longer truly look at them, and that is exactly what makes them dangerous. The important thing is that inflation today no longer works the way many people once knew it. It does not always appear as a price jump that shocks everyone in front of the shelf. More and more companies choose a different path. The box gets smaller, the package gets lighter. There are fewer servings, fewer discounts. You still see the same familiar brand, the same colors, the same image, the same flavor. But what you bring home is no longer the same as before. That is why so many families feel something is wrong, even though they cannot point to one exact product. They are not buying more, but the food runs out faster. They are not eating more, but the budget runs out faster. They are still living the same way as before, but the grocery bill no longer behaves the same way. And this is especially difficult for people living on a fixed budget. They are not looking for more premium foods. They are not changing to a more luxurious lifestyle. They are simply trying to buy the same items they have bought for years. But the cost of maintaining a normal kitchen is getting higher and higher. Behind a box of cereal is not just grain. Behind a can of soup is not just food. There is also cardboard, plastic, aluminum, ink, fuel, electricity, labor, warehousing, and transportation. When all of those costs rise together, the final product has to change in some way. And many times, the change is inside the package, not on the price tag. Not every food disappears from the shelf. Some foods are disappearing right inside the package. Perhaps that is the most dangerous kind of price increase, because when a product disappears from the shelf, everyone notices. But when it is still sitting there, still the same brand, still the same familiar price, while the amount of food inside keeps getting smaller, many people need months to realize what is happening. So tell me in the comments, which packaged product has shocked you the most in the past few years? A smaller cereal box? Fewer cookies in the package? Or a can of soup that no longer feeds the whole family like it used to? Because this is no longer the story of one product. This is the story of the entire shopping cart. After looking back at the 12 foods on this list, the most thought-provoking part may not be which one increased in price the fastest. The most thought-provoking part is that many of them were once considered ordinary. A cup of morning coffee, a carton of eggs in the refrigerator, a loaf of bread on the table, a box of cereal for breakfast. They are not luxury items, yet more and more people have to think twice before putting them into the cart. Not every food disappears from the shelf. Some disappear from the family budget first. Some get smaller inside the package. Some are still sitting there, but make shoppers stare at the price tag a few seconds longer. And perhaps that is the real story. Big changes often do not begin with a crisis. They begin with small changes repeated week after week in the supermarket. So which item on today's list concerns you the most? Share it below.